world, somebody hit the...
I just write very ridiculous. Yeah. You remember that guy?
Question about your archives.
Offhand, I do not know. If you would write a note with it down, and I can check in your name and phone number, and I can check and see.
I'm just beginning to think.
Yeah, we can certainly see what we have. Any relationship to Cleveland Cliffs, or was it?
They have had ownership at one time.
It was a what?
It's where the high school is now in Marquette. And we wouldn't handles, basically put on business like plastic.
Oh my goodness. Hey. You don't have to sign in.
Oh, okay.
Grab something, grab cookies or coffee and find a seat.
Find a chair.
I'm not giving up my couch to him. I might give it up to you.
One chair right there, man.
I think we still have some stuff back there. Well, heck, I'm going to go ahead and get started, because if we get any more people in here, we're not going to have any place for them to sit, and you'll have to stand around. I'll have to charge less. You were charged, right? $5 a head to come in here? No? Number one? The pay is going to be docked. That's my senior student assistant right there. He's the one that's really in charge, not me. Well, welcome to the archives, everybody. And there's more people coming. No. No. I'm going to
Oh, well,
you look like a big lemon line.
There's some seats back here.
I guess takes one to know one. Okay, let's try this again. Welcome to the archives, everybody. This is our second installment of the Evening at the Archives program. We try to do at least 2 of these every semester, and this is the second one. It's in conjunction with the Diversity Readers program. I'm not sure all of you if you're all familiar with that at all. And this year's theme is on immigration. So I thought, okay, well, why don't we do something on immigration and try to contribute to that, because we do have a lot of stuff on immigration. And I did some work recently, a few years ago, on that topic, and so the idea is to share that with you. The whole thing about Evening at the Archives is to try to get folks like you in here, raise awareness about the archives and our collections and how they're used in historical research. So not only am I going to be talking about beer, God, revolution, and what's the other one? Pasties, which, by the way, I had a real struggle to get every one of those in there. But I did, sort of. Pasties, sort of. But the whole purpose of this is to try to, increase awareness of the archives, get folks in here, share research that we're doing. But I'm also going to be showcasing parts of the collection. So I've actually got original documents and records here that I'm going to demonstrate and show how they correlates into our understanding of this topic and how we used it in our research here. And all of this stuff is available to you. You can come in anytime. You don't have to have an appointment to come into the archives. You don't have to have some special code or anything like that. It would be good not to wear any Red Sox, Yankees, White Sox paraphernalia. In fact, I often tell the librarians, and I tell others this too, there are only a few things you can say to me that would be very offensive. One would be to call me a White Sox fan or a Yankees fan, and the other would be to call me a librarian. Because I am not a librarian. And I have some colleagues who just love to call me a librarian because they know how much it gets to me. And, so having said that, welcome, and also happy. What's special about today? Don't What's special about today?
Opening day.
Thank you. Yes, it is. It's opening day. So, it's so funny. My girlfriend and I were at dinner tonight at Bango's, and I had a White Sox fan come up and be very rude to me while we were at dinner. Wasn't that true? Yeah. But then I also had a Cubs fan, so congratulate me for having a Grace jersey on. So yes, it's opening day. I'm a big Cubs fan. But that's not what we're here to talk about. How many of you have been to the archives, or any archives for that matter? Okay. When you think about, oh, by the way, this is going to be interactive, and another thing is it's on live. We are right now live on Facebook, which is really going to freak me out because I'm going to do some things here that's going to probably be rather questionable. And it's going to be live, and there's nothing I can do about it. Yes, most archivists are not as demonstrative as me. We tend to be more introverted, quiet people. Like librarians. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm a little different. Where was I? So some of you have been to an archives. Okay, I'm going to wax eloquently for a moment, partly because I have a biologist in the room who's a nationally known biologist, who's the chair of the academic senate, blah, 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 who's doing groundbreaking research right now on water buffaloes in Africa. Was it water buffaloes? No. No. Okay.
Chickadees.
Why are archives important? Archivists like to think of ourselves as guardians of memory. Have any of you ever wondered about how history is written? Who writes the history? Who writes history? Historians, right? By the way, I'm not a historian. I'm just a simple archivist. There's a librarian. So it's a good thing I said the librarian thing.
10 librarians.
Historians generally, and others, right? People who trained in history, right? And where do they think they get the information? The archives, from an archivist. I like to tell the historians on campus, I'm kind of like their Igor to their Frankenstein. And they wouldn't have a job without me. We like to think of ourselves, archivists, as guardians of memories. We're the ones that decide what's going to be remembered. One of my favorite cartoons, which I should have had up here, is one that says, "Be kind to archivists because we can erase you from memory." And that's not such a joke. It's actually kind of true. And have you ever wondered what that power is like? That's a tremendous power, right? And if you ever wondered, well, how do we decide what becomes memory? What are we going to remember? Because of all the records that are created, and I'm talking about everything that information is created by institutions like Northern, you folks writing in your letters, your journals. I hope some of you write journals, by the way. Keep a diary. Okay. Only about maybe 3 to 5% become archives. One of the things librarians love to say to me is they think I'm a pack rat. I'm not. I destroy most of the records I find. I spend most of my time deciding what to destroy and keep. Maybe 5% are kept as archival. What we pick to be the memory, the record of our memory as a society of culture. We help define it. See, isn't this just getting to my head? So how do we do that? Well, here's a good example. Okay, here's an archival record. Oh, by the way, this is supposed to be very interactive today. So question me, holler at me, challenge my assertions, whatever, as we're going along. Don't hesitate to ask me a question. This is an archival record. Well, this is a record, right? This is an historical record. This was a document that was written in Marquette on October 30th, 1880. Who's good at math? How old is it? 138 years. 138-year-old document. It was really funny. The other day I had a student in here who was from England. And, most people think, wow, it's 138 years back. She's like, what? It was written yesterday? Medieval? Okay, but this is an interesting document. It's a good example. What I like to do is show, there's a lot of things about this document that's very interesting. One, 19th century correspondence, they tended to have lots of elaborate design on the letterhead, some more than others. This isn't so much so, but you can see, it's got some interesting print and representation of their industry. It was also, the person writing it is writing with a dipping quill. You can tell that from the places where they, in wider. They may also be writing with a style of script, which in the 19th century was referred to as inserting. I don't know if anybody's heard of that. People tended to write or be trained, especially in businesses, to write in a certain script. So they all look kind of the same. Why would they do that? This is 1880. What happens roughly just shortly after this letter is written? What hits the business world? Typewriters, right? So prior to typewriters, people were trained to basically write a certain way. So that's very interesting about this document. The other thing I like is the paper. Look at this. It's almost 140 years old, and look how flexible it is. It's very likely that this paper was made with hemp. It may have also been made with recycled cotton rag fibers from old clothes, put through a calcium carbonate wash, and that's why it's in such great shape. You know, and another thing is I can read it with my eyes. Unfortunately, I can't go off about electronic records today, but anyhow, very interesting, right? Actually, wood fiber is the worst thing you can make paper from. It's a very unstable fiber. It has chemical agents in it. Have you ever left a newspaper out in the day and noticed it got brown? Correct me if I'm wrong, biologist. The ultraviolet light from the sun acts as a catalyst on those chemicals and creates a chemical reaction. It's actually creating sulfuric acid. So what you see, the browning, is sulfuric acid being created and eating away from the fibers of the paper. That's what the browning is, acid. You don't see hardly any of that. This paper is very similar to what it was when it was first made 140 years ago almost. So this is an old record, right? So now this is where you start screaming at me and saying, what the hell is he doing? And I'm doing it on Facebook! Oh my God, I'm not going to be here tomorrow. I like to think of the guy, I always like to think of the guy who was 138 years ago, sitting somewhere at a desk, writing this down, and thinking, oh my God, I just had a weird preposition of somebody in the future tearing up this letter in front of a bunch of people. What's the purpose of that drama? A dramatic moment. No. Anyway? Yes, very good. That is the best response I've ever gotten. Exactly it. My power. See what I told you? Be nice to me, or I'll erase you from history. That little guy, that guy was right. He's gone. Nobody will remember him now. Whoever was writing that. No, why am I doing it, Bill? Bingo. Everything I told you about that document was not unique to that document. There was nothing about that document that I showed you. It was all interesting, but it's not unique. There are other more important documents that have those same characteristics that are being retained elsewhere. So the reason I can confidently tear that up is because it has information that isn't valuable. The information reported on it is really what archivists are concerned about. It's really what we want to retain. And the stuff I'm going to show you later, I will never tear up. Because then I would really be crazy if I did that. Yes?
I was surprised that you touched it with your bare hands.
Oh, what? Something wrong? Are you implying something?
Not for you personally, but when I think about
Yeah, she's right. There are archives where, and we do have time gloves here. Oftentimes when a person comes in the archives in the reading room, we'll have them wear hard gloves because, you know, we embed material and stuff, you know, oils and dirt and stuff like that will get into the paper and be very damaging. Very good point. So that should have been a clue to you. You should have known that I was going about to just tear the hell out of that thing. Okay, so with that dramatic moment in my soapbox, we'll move on to Pasties Beard Revolution. Thank God. I want to set some context to this first. I'm going to be talking about about an aspect of immigration to the Marquette Iron Range. I'm not really going to be talking so much about the communities. I'm going to be talking about a certain aspect about the nature of the communities here and how it impacted the overall historical development and experience of the first 30 so years of the early 20th century. And I have to start out with beer. This is where I got beer into the thing. And this is a good segue into a really valuable historical record, and a record that we've used to help inform us about the context of culture and life and immigration It's in Marquette Iron Range. What you're looking at, hey, by the way, anybody from Ishmael here? I'm very sorry. Very sorry before. Esco, I didn't know you were from Ishmael. I'm sorry, Esco. Please don't take it against me. He's like an instrumental person who makes everything run here. So if I alienate Esco, I'm in big trouble. What you're looking at is an arrest record. This is an arrest record for the city of Ishmael. Has anybody else seen me do this before? Probably some of you may have. Nah, the students. Okay, good. Not most of you have. Okay, you're looking at an actual arrest record for the city of Ishmael. This was created in the month of April, 1888, and it documents the arrest and conviction of individuals who committed a crime in Ishmael in that year, April of 1888. This month, woohoo! How many years ago is that? Oh, it's 130 years ago. Exactly, right? Okay. Now, this document is what was created for a specific purpose, and that was to document an activity, an interaction between people, in this case, arrest and conviction of somebody committing a crime. However, its purpose for its creation long ago ended. We don't, the Ishmael Police Department's never come down here to look at this. They never will, unless they're just curious. It no longer serves the purpose it was created for. However, an archivist came along, and unlike this poor letter and the poor staff that was writing it, realized, no, this has got value beyond what it was originally created for. This is how it becomes archival because of the information. And so it's like an old database. It has old columns in here of information. So you have the names of the people who were arrested, their age, so you do some genealogical demographic stuff, their nativity, date of arrest, why they were arrested, what they were fined, if anything, and so forth. But so, what is nativity? Where they were born. Where were you born, sir? Marquette. Oh my God, Austin, that's you. When did you get here? I didn't even know it was you. Where were you born? She's my girlfriend, by the way. She was born in Marquette. Anybody born outside the United States here? That was what's so great about that English student. Boy, did I rag on her while she was there. Anyway, anybody born outside the United States? Nobody. Okay, so how does this read? So here's the nativity. That's what nativity. You're asking what country you from. Finnish, English, Irish, an American, not an American Indian. Irish, English, Finnish, Swedish, Finnish, Irish, German, French, Swedish, Irish, English. It was a big bar fight. French, Irish, some poor French dude. And by the way, the French dude is probably French Canadian. Irish, English, French, Finnish, English, Finnish, Swedish, Irish, Scotch, German, Cornish. In fact, two 12-year-old Cornish kids, Henry Treblecock, Thomas Reed, 12 years old, were arrested for disorderly conduct. They were each fined $1. And then they were discharged on promise to be good. I'm not joking, it says that, promise to be good. What is a Cornish person? This is where the pasties come from. Cornwall, where is Cornwall? In England. Why are they called English?
Part of England.
They're English. Cornwall's just a province.
Near Wales.
But a very important province to those people.
Very well, yeah. But also very important to us. They were very important to us. That's why they were distinctly identified differently than the English, than the Cornish. And not only that, they were 12-year-old Cornish. Why? Anybody know?
Was there mining back there?
Mining back. Hold on to that thought because I'm going to get to it in a moment. But pasties, yes. We called them what? We had a nickname for them.
Cousin Jacks.
Cousin Jacks. Very good. Okay, so what does that tell us about Ishmaeli society in the late 19th century?
Diversity.
Hmm?
A lot of diversity.
Immigrants. It was a predominantly immigrant-based society, right? Only one person is identified as an American. Probably somebody from downstate. Right?
So what's the name of the one American?
Oh, James Easton. Sounds like New England.
Yes.
It's really funny. One time, this guy comes up to me afterwards. He says, "Oh, that was my great-grandfather." Not James Easton, but some other guy. It was really funny. I'd never had anybody do that before. Okay, so this tells us a lot about the immigrant character, right? Why were they arrested? Drunk, 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 drunk. Fast driving. Two Finnish guys, Simon and Silas, 26 and 32, were arrested for fast driving. What were they driving? Come on, somebody help me out here. What do you think they were driving fast? A wagon?
A bike.
Number one, you don't get the statement.
What year is it?
1888.
Horse and buggy?
Well, horse, you ride a horse, right? Horse and buggy, yeah. Do they refer to it as driving in those days? I don't know. Fast driving. I think it was a bicycle. I'm just guessing. I'm totally guessing. I don't know. It's funny, though. Fast driving, bicycling becomes a huge fad around this time, right about this time. In fact, it was causing the American Medical Association a lot of grief. They were very concerned about women. And you all women should take notice here for a moment. They were so concerned that they actually came up with a disease, and it was actually officially in the whatever their disease book is for a while until about the 1920s when it was finally taken out. It was called bicycle face. I don't know why men wouldn't get it, but women would get bicycle face. They were very concerned about women riding bikes. We're getting bicycle face. Now we can speculate as to all sorts of reasons why, but I think, and this is my understanding, you get on a bike, women weren't supposed to exert themselves. It was kind of a middle class thing too. So you're cranking away, you're exerting yourself, you've got bugs and wind and dirt hitting your face or whatever, right? You're like these crazy Finnish guys, you're racing around fishing. You're doing this all the time, right? Well, unlike men, when women get off the bike, it doesn't go away. So you just walk around like this all day. And you get bicycle face. If you ride the bike too many times, it just becomes permanent. And you'll never get married. So remember that. I don't worry about that, right? We don't worry about that. Right? It just doesn't happen. So these Finnish guys, drunk, fast riding. Drunk, 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 vagrant, drunkenness, drunk, drunk, drunkenness, drunk, drunk, drunk. Damn it, another 12-year-old. Delinquent Irish kid this time. Thomas Hughes, 12 years old, arrested for petty larceny. But, and this is my favorite one, and it's a French guy, I'm a Francophile. No, I'm a Francophone, right? Because I have too many German genes in me. If I start speaking French, I get swollen lips, and I can't breathe. It's like I have an allergic reaction. This French guy was arrested for common drunkenness.
What?
Yeah, I don't know. Then, not to be outdone, this English guy a little bit later gets arrested for common drunkenness. The only thing somebody suggested, first time, I've been doing this for like 20 years, 21 years, right? A student said to me, well, maybe that's because he was constantly getting arrested every day. And I thought, well, that makes sense. Common drunkenness, common drunkenness, just common drunk, right? But I thought it was pretty funny. And it's like that the rest of the way down until you get to the Cornish kids for disorderly conduct, which I would love to know what they did. Hopefully it was throwing a baseball through a window or something. So what does that tell us? This is on a page taken from the index of the Marquette County Court records. We have the Marquette County Court records. The index is right here. It's too big for me to get out right now. But we have an index. We have all of the court records, civil and criminal, in Marquette County from 1852 until, I think, 2005. And you can come in. We have the index to the court cases. And I'm going to show you one later. And you can come in anytime and look at these. And this is the index. And you can see this was turned to a page where, look at the violation of liquor laws here. In 1912, a student one day took the city directory for 1912 and looked at the establishments, businesses that were in the downtown area where South Street tees and where Washington tees into Front Street. What do we have there today? We got the Fearling, we got, there were 26 saloons in 1912. Alcoholism was a huge problem. It was a huge domestic public health problem in the United States. This gives us some sense of that, right? The arrest record gives us some sense of how extensive the alcohol problem was, even up here. And it's going to inform a little bit of our understanding of immigrant experience in the next couple of decades, you know, leading up to what happens in what year, 1919? It's hard to get an amendment passed, amendment to the Constitution, right? You either have to have a civil war or something else. Women, you remember what happened in the late 70s, right, with the ERA? Well, that arrest record gives us some sense of why the United States was able to get an amendment to the Constitution prohibiting the sale of alcohol. Was it the sale or the, I can never remember, sale or purchase or creation? I don't remember anymore. So that's where the beer comes in, and it sort of informs a little bit more about what happens in the rest of, so that's 100 bottles of beer. Other things, you know, the pasties, and remember the Cornish, we just talked about the Cornish and the boys. The Cornish began arriving around this 1880 to the Marquette Iron Range, and they were actively recruited in some cases by the mining companies from Cornwall, and they were attracted to this area after the 1860s, 70s, when we stopped doing above ground or open pit mining. They, for some reason, Cornish miners didn't like open pit mining, and were more interested in working underground. Hobbits, trolls, dwarfs, I don't know. They never represented more than about 25% of miners, and by 1909 their numbers dropped to about 13%. However, because they were from Cornwall, and what is Cornwall in England? What is it known
Tin
for?
mining.
Tin mining, right. It's the hard rock mining region of England. It's not just tin mining, I think there's some other mining going on too. But it's the hard rock mining region, so the miners were experienced and skilled. And so when they came to work here, they came as mining foremen, captains, etc. And we called them Cornish rather than English, cousin Jacks. So those two boys, where I went, those two boys were probably sons of a foreman or a foreman or whatever captains in the mines. They tended to be the upper strata of the mining labor force hierarchy, the more skilled, authoritative group. Then the Depression hits in 1893. How many of you are familiar with the Depression in 1893? Austin, thank you. I would expect you to. He's a history major. Was, he graduated. Devastating depression. Devastating depression. It was almost, I mean, worse than the third depression in the 1930s to some extent. Here, it wiped out the labor force. It went from 17,000 to about 3,500 within a year or so. Caused massive outmigration to the area. 2 years later, miners went on strike. I think many of you are probably familiar with the strike of 1895, are you? I'm making some assumptions here. Strike of 1895 was a very, very contentious, violent strike. It was organized by an independent union. It was led by the Finnish workers. And it resulted in the state militia coming in and camping outside of Ishpeming in order to break the strike. It's the only time that the state militia has ever been brought up here to break a strike. And in 1899, they tried again. This time, there is a split. This is where we start to begin to see a split in the ranks of the miners here, with the Cornish independent mine control not supporting the Finnish. Because by this time now, starting in the late 1880s or so, as that indicates in the arrest record, Finns now start coming into the area and are working. But they tend to have the lower class, low skilled, low area. They, without the support of the Cornish Union, the strike in 1899 fails. So this is to give you some context too, that there was a lot of upheaval in the Iron Range at the time, a lot of labor activity, labor strife, but it all fails, and badly, and causes a split in the labor force here. At the same time, and nationally, this is a very dramatic period in U.S. history, and this area was very much part of that. And this is where the revolution comes in a little bit. We all know that the United States becomes a corporate capitalist-based economy, with only a handful of major corporations dominating the major industries in the United States. Most of the resource extraction is, by this point, it's a very dominant corporate-based economy. And in response to that, labor is organizing and begins organizing in the 1890s. And the Socialist Party also organizes and becomes very successful in the electoral process So that by 1912 and 1920, in the two presidential elections, the Socialist Party wins over 900,000 votes. Several hundred municipalities elect socialists. 2 congressmen, William Burker, what was his first name? From Milwaukee, is elected to Congress and is actually barred from taking his seat. The board is locked, prevent him from taking his seat. The Socialist Party makes serious gains. The industrial workers of the world, how many of you have heard of the Wobblers? They organized in 1905, a very large, several 100,000 members across the country. It is a syndicalist, anarcho-syndicalist organization, which I'll get to, bent on the overthrow of the capitalist system. It's an industrial union. It's operating in opposition to the skilled craft unions like the AFL, that is organizing at this time as well. And the Western Federation of Miners, which organized in 1893, allies with the IWW in 1905, 1907, and become very instrumental in the UP. We'll get to that in just a moment. But what I'm trying to get at here is there is a lot of social and cultural and political upheaval going on in the United States. The Russian Revolution occurs in 1917. How many of you are familiar with the Seattle General Strike? Oh, it's the only time in U.S. history where a city, a large American metropolitan area, was completely shut down for 5 days, and the workers actually took control. For a brief moment, there was actually a socialist revolution in the United States in the city of Seattle. And it was, of course, brutally crushed by state militia, federal, and the army as well. But that happens in 1919. At the same time, we have a series of anarchist bombings occurring. Not only the disruption and the strikes are going on, but we have some anarchist bombings going on. How many of you are familiar with Sacco and Vanzetti case? Some of you are. It was a very celebrated case where 2 Italian immigrants were arrested and many argue unjustly convicted of murdering a guard and a bank teller in a robbery. Became a big celebrated case, but it was an example of fear of domestic terrorism, which leads to the Palmer raids in 1919. I know this number seems very small when you consider what ICE is doing today. But 6,000 people are arrested, 556 are deported in one night across the United States. And they were targeting members of the IWW, the WFM, the Socialist Party, and people like Sacco and Vanzetti. And this is going to become very important later on in the talk.
So where were these people from, these 556?
Very good. Hold on to that question because I'll address it in just a moment. Very good question, though. It's going to come up a little bit later. My point, and this is just, this is happening across the country, and in the hard rock mining areas of the country, there were major labor wars going on. The Colorado labor wars of 1903 and 04. This was a WFM-led, thousands of miners, intervention by the state militia, the U.S. Army, Pinkertons. I'm talking about warfare. There are squads of miners and Pinkertons and militia literally fighting. In some of the coal fields in Pennsylvania, there were actual military planes after World War I strafing marching workers, literally strafing them. This was industrial warfare on a scale we would just be appalled by today. The Copper Country Strike, everybody knows about that, right? 265 days, the Italian Hall disaster, the Butte, Montana labor riots, where several scores of workers were shot. Same thing with the Anaconda. My point is this is a period of great instability and a lot of fear. It's also the progressive era. How many of you are familiar with the progressive era? And what you can talk, Austin, tell us about that.
The progressives? Like, what do you know?
I don't know. Middle class. So there's an upper middle class movement roughly between 1900 and 1920. So you have radical labor organizing to challenge industrial capitalism. The progressive movement is stepping in and saying, hey, wait a minute, this is chaos. We have cartels, we have monopolies. This is the period when we have all of the regulatory agencies that are established, including the Federal Reserve System and all of the Food and Drug Administration, in an attempt to try to rationalize the new corporate industrial reality of the United States economy. And they also work to try to improve labor conditions, 8-hour day, child labor laws, and so forth. So all of this is happening at the same time between 1900 and 1930. What's happening on the Marquette Iron Range? Zero. Big fat zero. There's nothing happening here. The last strike was 1899, and that's it. Between 1899, roughly 1900, and 1946, there is no organized labor action on the Marquette Iron Range. Happens up in the Keweenaw, happens in the Mesabi Range, two very dramatic strikes there. Nothing is happening here. Why? When researchers come into the archives and try to do this, teach this with students, they don't come in with a preconceived thesis in their head, right? They come in here with a question or a historical problem they want to solve. Something that's like, why? You know, what is the answer to this problem? And they review the evidence using critical analysis skills. This is what we teach in the archives, to determine good evidence, what's good, credible, authentic evidence to support or answer this question, why? So why was there no labor strike? Why was this a relatively quiescent, quiet place? Anybody want to throw out any ideas before going through why they think?
I can't believe they were paid better here.
They were paid no better than workers on the Mesabi Range or out in the West. And I'll show you that.
Okay, what do you do with the large variety of ethnicities? And therefore there were smaller groups and
That's a very good question, and the answer is no. My argument is no. But hold on to that and challenge it later. My argument is no.
Too many people that are willing to work and not enough jobs, so that they have an overabundance of workers.
That would be true if the population hadn't changed, and I'll show you this in a moment too.
Lack of organized labor.
No, the IWW was here, and the WFM was here, the Socialist Party.
We got new populations coming in, Marquette's right off the lake.
Got new populations coming in and others going out. So those are all good ideas. So the question is why? Well, first off, and this is my argument, this is based on our research and material here, I argue that the communities of Ishpeming and Negaunee were very settled communities, unlike in the Mesabi Range, which had sort of been thrown up all at once within a very short period of time. Same out the west, the western areas, very rough, more disorganized frontier-type communities. In Ishpeming and Negaunee was very different. A good example is in 1900, Martin Hendrickson, who was a very renowned socialist agitator, he was the editor of the American Worker in New York City at the time, came to Ishpeming in 1900, it was in the fall of 1900, with the intent of trying to organize a socialist party local here. He was basically run out of town. He could not get any place to rent him room. Finally, he got space in one of the independent labor unions, miners unions, and got some space there, but most people that showed up were denouncing him. There were some scuffles between supporters and others, and a Lutheran minister called him an atheist, anti-church, horned devil. My kind of person. My kind of socialist. But it's just you know, why? If he had gone, and he did, to northern Minnesota, gone up to Calumet, his reception would have been far different. So the question is why? The population in Ishpeming began to decline from a high of 13,255, went down by 1930, it had declined 31% to 9,000. There was a major outflow of workers that had begun in the 1890s, possibly because of the labor unrest. Foreign-born population decreased a whopping 53% in Ishpeming at this time. Finnish-born population decreased 29.2% in just 10 years. These are Finnish-born. Also, it tended to be a more diversified economy. Now, the Gossard plant comes in 1918. There was a little bit more of a diversified economy here. There was work available in other areas. And why was there such a population decline? It wasn't because it wasn't work in the mines, but what had changed was technology. New technology was introduced, in particular the hydraulic, what is it called? Drill, and other machinery that dramatically reduced the amount of labor that was needed in the mines. So you just simply had a loss of employment because of that. But also what starts happening around 1905, 1910, downstate. A lot of people left this area to go for jobs, go take jobs down in Detroit in the burgeoning auto industry. So 9/10 of the population tended to live in and around downtown. In Ishpeming's case, a lot of them because they worked at the Cliffs Shaft. And this is really interesting. Single family units accounted for 80% of residential structures. Multiple dwellings were only 2%. The IWW tended to be, members of the IWW tended to be rootless young men, not attached to a married young man. In fact, they were called spindle stiffs. You know what a spindle stiff was? Or spindle was? Basically just a roll of a blanket with some clothes and you went from work to work. So the IWW, the musical troubadours, you know, were called spindle stiffs. So we had a place here, though, where most of the structure were residential units, residential homes, families. Same thing with Negaunee. The population also declines dramatically, just in 20 years, 23%. And this is also an interesting statistic. The ratio of men to women was very much more closely matched, which is also a sign of stability. And demographically, foreign-born also decreases 47.6%. And there was a culture of self-sufficiency as well. Part-time farmers, most people had gardens. CCI opened up 15,000 square feet of land to truck farming. People had gardens, they created their own produce. We have a collection called the Red Dust Oral History Collection, which I'll show you in a moment. And if you look at some of the interviews of people, the people who were children roughly around this time, most of them will tell you they didn't go. They didn't realize there was a depression, for example, or there was any period of unrest or want. Most people knew how to make clothing. They knew how to hunt. They had their gardens. CCI provided woodlots for cutting down trees for wood in the winter. I had Ernie Ron. Anybody heard of Ernie Ron? The longtime labor organizer. When I first came here, he gave me a tour of Ann Street, which was one of the locations. And he talked about how everyone had cows, pigs, and chickens in their yards. So there was a different kind of cultural self-sufficiency there that didn't exist in a lot of the other mining regions in the country, which sort of, again, lent to that sense of calm stability. The locations. Everybody's familiar with the concept of locations, right? Who can tell us what a location is? Can you tell us? Yeah.
It's a neighborhood.
Okay, why was it called a location, though? What was it about?
Well, they were usually neighborhoods around a particular mine, depends around the mine, like the Cleveland location was.
Ann Street was across from, I don't remember which mine it was.
And then Skylight and North Lake, and I mean, they all centered around mining.
Right, around their place of employment, and there's a lot of, or ethnic groups. Sometimes there were places that were known as Finn towns or Swede town or Polish. But in my research, there's a lot more diversity, especially in the ones that are just centered around mines. And not only that, you would think that, I think who brought, was it you that mentioned more, well, I call it cohesion here, among fewer immigrant groups, so they would get along better? Was that you? Who said that? Well, was it you?
Yeah.
There were still the same number of different immigrant groups here, but they got along. There wasn't a lot of ethnic fighting going on. And these are anecdotal, what they suggest. These are quotes from the Red Dust Oral History Project. Is anyone familiar with Red Dust?
Is it the National Mining School program, or was that
Yes. Roughly between about 1989 and close to 2000, 3 teachers at Aspen Ridge Middle School. Before that, I think it was, I don't remember what it was called. National Mine, was it? Right. It was Maxine Honkala, Bobby Amin. They trained classes to do oral histories. I mean, they did really good job. They had people come in and they would do training on how to do oral histories. And then they'd have their students go out and interview family members or people in the neighborhoods who had been around for a long time. And they would have them interview different topics and subjects. So we have this collection. What did I do? Sorry. You can see this is just one box of several. And each one of these folders is a transcription of an interview of someone who lived in this region in the West County area during the 1910s, 20s, 30s, 40s, and all the way up. And they're organized around different topics, and mining was one of them, immigration was one of them, education, and so forth. And I've gone through some of these, and I've just picked out some, and again, this was anecdotal, sort of just random. Hugo Korpinen, he remembers growing up in the 1920s. He said, we were just like one big happy family. This was in Nagani. Lived side by side with Cornish and Italian immigrant families. He described sharing common tasks such as wood cutting, snow shoveling. Everybody remembers the Reverend David Spelgatti, who actually grew up also in the Nagani area. He remembered that people, quote, that lived on the other side of our house were English, and then across the street from us they were French, and across the alley they were French, and kitty corner to us were Swede and French. Next door to us were Finnish and French. A lot of French. So it was all mixed up and everybody got along. Frank Matthews from the Ishpeming area, he says he remembers, quote, there were Swedes, Cornish, the English, the Irish, the Scotch, the Welsh, you name it. They all intermingled. When somebody got hurt or sick in the family, everybody came to help. They helped you with the garden, they helped you cutting wood, cutting hay, build your house, build your barn. Sunday, everybody go to church, and this is right, go to church of their choice. And the family was gone, and right after dinner, they'd go visiting the sick, no matter who they were. Suggesting this, even though there was a lot of ethnic groups, different diversities, they all intermingled, they all got along. There's no evidence, and especially in the arrest records of any, and in the later ones, of large-scale fights between different ethnic groups. It is also translated or transitioned into the mines themselves. William Tallis, who actually came here, he was one of the few who came from the Mesabi mines, came here to work in Ishpeming. In 1912, he said of the miners he started to work with, very nice fellers. The nicest fellers I ever found was when I came to Ishpeming, and there they called each other Pard. Everybody was Pard. Hey, Pard, want some help, Pard? Would you like to come over here? And so on. So they were very friendly people to work with. Les Kalanen said something very similar. Quote, most of my coworkers were people that were raised in this area, and we had a lot in common. So it wasn't difficult to work with them. Family members, this is an interesting thing too. Family members that worked for the same company were my father, 2 brothers, several uncles, 2 sons, many cousins. In fact, there's a great picture of Bernie Ron after he came back from the war with the mining group, and in the picture is his father and his brother. So there was a lot of families that worked and lived in the mines. So they got along in the mines as well. So there isn't a lot of evidence, and there is that suggests is the alternative is that we had very stable residential families, and everybody seemed to have gotten along. Now, the Finnish, yes.
So in the locations up in the Marquette Iron Range, were the houses company housing or?
Yes, very good. CCI actually had 600 houses, both in Nagani and Ishpeming, that they would rent out to, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this a little bit later on, that they would rent out to the miners at a very low rent. And in fact, they had a program that allowed renters to work towards ownership of the house as well. As part of, and I'm going to talk about this other component of this. So the Finns were different here as well. When you think of the Finns, what does everybody think about? Sauna. Okay. What else do you think about when people think about the old Finns? Huh?
Hardworking.
Hardworking. Very good. These are all good things. Muscular.
Cooperatives.
Okay, but what were the cooperatives politically based on?
Socialist.
Socialism, communism, right? So they often think of the Red Finns, Socialist Finns, right. And they also think of Finns doing what else?
Making cheese. Used to.
Making vodka, drinking.
Oh, really?
Yeah, drinking. They think of Finns drinking. In fact, that's what a lot of Finns are in this list, right? That I called out. So there's this image of Finns, right, as being sort of unstable, radical commies in this time period, right?
Besides the white.
Huh?
Besides the white Finns.
Besides the white, which I think is what these guys were. I think one of the big distinctions between the Masabi Range and here was that the nature of the Finnish population was very different. Much more conservative, much more politically conservative, socially conservative. There was a very large temperance, 800-member temperance movement here, a Finnish temperance movement in the Iron Range because of their reaction to drinking problem. But what we did was, we looked at this. We also have here in the archives the naturalization immigration records from Marquette County, again from roughly the late 1850s all the way up to the 1970s. And there's surname index to this as well. So you can actually come in here anytime and see if you can find one of your ancestors. And these are the actual petitions. There are two different things. The person would petition to naturalize, and then there was about a 5-year period, and then they would actually certify. And the certification record is here as well. So what we did was we went through this painstakingly, looked at all the Finnish, the ones who were born in Finland, born and came here between 1905 and 1920. And what we found was, first of all, the first wave of Finnish immigration generally in the United States was very rural. It came from the green part here, which is most of Finland, as you see up here. But then after 1904, that changes. There's a second wave of Finnish immigration to the United States. And it's as a result of what was called the Russification program. And why was it called that? Anybody?
What was the word?
Russification program.
Because Russia took over Finland.
Right. Finland was not an independent sovereign country at this time. Finland was a grand duchy of the Russian Empire. And around 1903-04, the Russian Governor General enacts a Russification program. It was designed to basically crush the growing socialist, Marxist union activity that was going on in the industrial south of Finland, particularly in the areas of Helsinki and Turku in particular. And as a result, these guys said, I'm out of here. And they came to the United States. These were urban, militant, proletariat, classic communist workers coming to the United States. But guess what? They didn't come here. They basically leapfrogged us and went on to the Tijuana, went on to the Masabi Range, went on to the western states. Our analysis shows that during this period, the Finns that came here, 80% were from the green rural areas, including this guy right here. Vittori Tinisma. Tinisma?
That's T-Y-Y, it's Tunisma.
T-Y-Y, yeah, it's how it's spelled.
Tunisma.
Tunisma. He came from this area right here. It was called Cortes Järvi. Cortes Järvi. He came here in, he arrived, well, he was born there in 1894. He was married in Ishpeming in 1924. He came into the United States via Sault Ste. Marie on February 26, 1905. This is his naturalization certificate, his declaration of intention, and this is a picture. And what's really interesting is they had to swear an oath when they did this, and I'll read this to you. This is what he had to swear. I will, before being admitted to citizenship, renounce forever all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty, and particularly by name to the prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty, which I may be at the time of admission a citizen or subject of. In his case, it was the Tsar of Russia. I am not an anarchist. Better yet, I am not a polygamist. nor a believer in the practice of polygamy. And it is my intention, in good faith, to become a citizen of the United States and to reside permanently therein. And I certify that the photograph affixed here is not a duplicate or triplicate likeness of me, so help me God. So two things they were worried about. He wasn't an anarchist. Remember what I said about what was happening? There was a lot of political upheaval, labor unrest. People were identified as anarchists, like the IWW, anarcho-syndicalists, and a lot of bomb throwing at the time. So we didn't want anarchists here, and certainly not polygamists, which is really interesting. Now, I can only imagine what that's referring to. What's that?
And the early ones didn't have that.
Utah thing, yeah. And the same thing with this fellow here. This guy his name was Toivo John Carroll, and he later became Toivo John Koski. I mean, Koski here is a common Finnish name. And here's his picture. Same thing with him. He came from, and this case, he came from Vasa. There. That's where he was born, actually, was in Vasa in 1882. And he arrived here through New York in 1905. He would go on to marry Olga. You said H-Y-Y is pronounced who?
Y is always pronounced oo
Okay, Olga
in this
Hutna.
language.
And they went on to have 3 children in Marquette, Michigan. And he had to swear the same oath and renounce that. And this is his picture as well. So, yes.
As a side to this, my mother always used to call the IWW a group of I won't work. So that's just something that I remember from my youth.
I've never heard that one. That's good. They're also called wobblies, if you've ever heard that term. So my point here is this, is that this region tended to be more rural, agrarian, the assumption being probably more conservative, certainly not trained or experienced in classic industrial class warfare down here, Marxist ideology, where this is where most of these people came, and they went elsewhere. So only about 20% of the Finns that we found in the immigration records during this period came from here. So there's a very different, and it's flipped to the rest of the country. So my argument is that to a great extent, one of the reasons why we had such more stability here is the Finnish population was much more conservative, much more settled. What's that? Sorry.
They weren't unionized.
Actually, there was unions here, but they weren't very successful. Plus, we also like the other immigrant groups, there's a decline in the Finnish-born population, so that by 1910, only 39.8% of the foreign-born population was Finnish. But if you look, most of them were miners. 57% in Ishpeming and 55% in Nagani worked as miners.
Do you know with the Maple Ridge Workers Association in Rock, what section of
I do not know that, and I do have that collection now. I have the records of the Rockwork Maple. Anybody who speaks Finnish and would like to come and spend time translating that collection would be more than welcome. I can't pay you, but you get the satisfaction of knowing you're contributing to our historical memory.
Immigration documents, but is it your parents or
No,
no
I have not
names,
seen anything with parents or family members.
That would be a nice
That
friend
would.
thing.
It'll tell you though what train they came on, the name of the train in some cases, or the name of the boat. You know, but it won't tell you that.
How many of them are the immigration?
What's that?
How many of them are women?
How many are women? That was a good question. I don't know the answer. I don't remember that we looked at the gender or the distinction. But that's a good question. Now there's other immigration coming here as well. And of course, the Italians start to come. And others from South and Central Europe. This is very important later on. Italian immigration begins significantly after 1890. It increases dramatically by 1910 to the point, now they never become anywhere near as big a population as the Finns or the English or the French, but they are 16% of the miners on the Marquette Iron Range in 1910. And of the of the actual Italian-born immigrants that were here in 1910, 87% of them identified themselves as miners. And you can see these other bars. The yellow one is Austria. The green, or this is really interesting, in 1910, this gray, these are people who are identified as being from Russia. But I don't think they're from Russia. I think they were probably either Finnish or Polish, because they would have been, Poland in particular, was also part of the Russian Empire at the time. Although this orange part is also, they are definitely identified as Polish. So you start to see a different type of immigration coming, and I wanted to show you this because this becomes very central in a moment as to why that's important. And also, we have this fellow here. Another. This is Angelo Zenti. Zenti is another common name around here, I think. Anybody know any Zentis? Mm-hmm. Well, this could be one of his ancestors. This is Angelo Zenti. He came from the north. Actually, he's identified, his race is identified as North Italian. That's a race identified here. His nationality is Italian. He was born in Riva, Italy, in 1897. He wasn't married. He came through, in part, from, what is H-A-V-R-E? Remember, I can't speak French. How is that pronounced in French? Havre? Isn't that like the football player guy? Oh, okay. Well, close. And he actually came, and he came in 1926, and he arrived on the vessel Yield. So again, this is another example of the records we have here in naturalization.
Excuse me, did you say one of those colors was Austrian?
Yeah, the yellow.
I've been doing a lot of research in my, yeah, it's probably, it could be the Austrian Empire, because that's where my relatives are from, south and western Ukraine.
I was just going to mention that even though it says Austria, it's not likely from the Austria we know today. This was the Austro-Hungarian Empire, so these people were most likely Slovenian, Croatian, maybe Serbian as well. Yeah.
Back in there, when a lot of the Finns came to America, they were classified as being the yellow race.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that.
if you look at around, you can still see traces of the Orient in some of them. With the
Oh,
eyes and their open
yeah.
eyes.
They were an Indo-European language, basically. Right. Interesting. I didn't know that.
Market.
Huh?
That's
Sure.
when there's a time where the Finns changed their names too.
Well, that guy Koski is a good example. Carol Tarkovsky.
Like Koskaniemi and Major
Yeah.
Koskaniemi,
Mhm.
or went to Mackey, they just went to Mackey.
Mhm.
It was just always,
I'm guessing they did that for simplicity's sake, maybe, to maybe better anglicize them. I know a lot of German immigrants did that. They would change their names.
Could some of that be Sami folks that come from far north, Finland, and that's part of Norway?
Could be. Could be. I don't know.
Now documented pretty much as a closer to American Indian population than European.
It's possible. I don't know. So it wasn't that the IWW and the Socialist Party and the Western Federation of Miners weren't here. They were here. They had a presence here. They were active. They had adherents. In fact, on April 1st, 1909, the M.M. Duncan, who's going to show up again in a moment, who was the superintendent of mines at CCI, in his annual report, he wrote, on April 1st, there was an advance in wages averaging 7%. Wages went up significantly. Wages went up significantly during this time period as well. You can see that in 1909, men were making just above about $2.70 an hour, no, $2.70 a day, $2.70 a day in 1909. By 1920, they were making almost $7 a day. And of course, in 1915, what happens? Yeah, but what else? That had a huge effect on wages in industry. I think it was 1915. Was it 1915? Henry Ford implements the first $5 day, and that changed everything across multiple industries. And so you see that happening on a huge increase beginning during and after World War I in the average wage, daily wage of the workers, corresponding increase in cost of production as well. There were major recessions after World War I here. But he's writing here, on April 1st, it was advance in wages averaging 7%. As stated in the annual reports for 1909, the cost of living had appreciably increased since the last advance, and it was to meet that the wages were raised. There has been no dissatisfaction since that time, and the supply of labor has been ample. There has not been any improvement, however, in the class of men applying for work. They are largely Finlanders and Italians, and do not speak the English language. Bear with me here. So even though I'm arguing to some extent that in general the population was very conservative as compared, there's still a lot of radical Finns up here. There's still people that are causing sorry, I don't know why I had that so far back. Okay, which brings me to this. In the Gwyn district, for example, the Western Federation of Miners, and this again is Duncan writing in his report, the Western Federation of Miners have organized a lodge which at one time had 280 members. At the present time, there are only 150 in good standing. This organization is a menace to the peace of the district and is receiving the attention that it deserves. Unless it is broken up now, we shall, no doubt, have trouble as soon as better times arrive, and there is a greater demand for labor. Now again, remember this is 1909, 2 years after the massive strike on the Mesabi Range, which involved the Western Federation of Miners and the IWWs. So there is obviously a concern on the part of CCI. And this translates itself into the building of what was called the Labor Temple in Nagani. Has anybody ever heard of the Labor Temple? This isn't actually the Labor Temple, but this is a representation of one in Thunder Bay, Ontario. I don't have a picture of the actual Labor Temple, but this is the closest one I've got that looks like, from what I've been told, of the original Labor Temple that was in Nagani. What's that?
So I think I have a picture of the old temple. I just
Oh, if you've got one, I'd love to get a copy.
I'll bring it in the next month.
The Finnish Socialist Federation, which formed in 1906 across the United States, established a chapter here as well and built the temple in 1910. And it was quite a structure. It was 115 feet by 44 feet. It had a gym, baths, reading rooms. It had a small assembly room, and it had a restaurant. The theater auditorium had equipment for modern equipment and plush decor, and it could hold up to 500 people on the main floor and 100 in the gallery. It was a place where I have oral history accounts of young people going to dances, whether they were communists or not. It was the best place to go, apparently, for various types of entertainment. But it was the focal point of a great schism amongst the socialists, the IWW, and the Western Federation of Miners, between what were called anarcho-syndicalists and parliamentarians. The anarcho-syndicalists were the ones that were the IWW adherents, members of the WFM. These were the classic revolutionaries, the saboteurs, the ones who advocated work stoppage, destroying machinery and equipment, engaging in activities to bring down the capitalist system. The parliamentarians within the Socialist Party, represented by a man named Frank Altonen, they were the ones who advocated electoral cooperation. They ran for political office, all sorts of political office, and advocated more legal methods of gaining power through the legitimate electoral process. This split the party in two, including here, dramatically, over the control of this labor temple. And ironically, they took their battle to the Marquette County Courthouse, where they actually fought it out in a civil lawsuit. And we have the records of that struggle in the archives. And what's great about stuff like this is stuff had to be presented in evidence, right? And so in the records of the court proceedings, we can find, hard for me to do this, Socialist Party charter. For the actual charter of the Socialist Party here in Nagani. This is the actual charter that they got from the State Socialist Organization. And it's part of the actual court records in the Marquette County Court. It's in the bin. These records include transcripts and other evidence. In fact, I got some of my best material from this because they had to translate a lot of the stuff that William Risto, in fact, wrote from Finnish to English to make it evidence in court. So it's a great record, something you wouldn't expect to find to give us insight into the division and schism within the Socialist Party and left-wing political activism here over this temple. And these folks were referred to as socialistic Finns. And this is from the Ishpeming Iron Ore, talking about the socialistic Finn. He's against the government and its laws, and he defies game wardens. He dynamites fish. He sets nets in the streams. He goes against good sportsmanship, and he waves a red flag. Isn't this a great Youper thing? I mean, think about it. If you're a Youper and you don't like these damn socialistic Finns, oh, God damn it, don't be against game wardens. They represent authority in the field and the streams. Dynamites fish, that's what I like a lot. With all the many privileges America freely extends him, he must set himself up in opposition to law and order. Is it any wonder his employers have grown tired of his mutterings, his actions, his temples, his red rag? The socialistic Finn had better stop long enough in his foolishness to take a clear look about him. He is manufacturing a lot of ammunition that is soon to be turned against himself. So this was the editorial opinion of the Iron Ore. But it wasn't too far from the truth. If you look at the political situation here in Marquette County, today it's the only blue county in the UP, right? Back then it was decidedly red. The blue bars are all the votes for Republican candidates. In the 1908, 12, 16, and 20 election, the Socialist Party is the small blue box down here. The Socialist Party never garnered more than about 600 votes in any one election in the county. The Republicans dominated. The red are the Democrats. This, of course, was Teddy Roosevelt's Bull Moose Progressive Party in 1912. In fact, 1912 was one of the Socialist Party's best years, almost 1 million votes. In 1920, the Socialist candidate, Eugene V. Debs, actually ran for president from prison. And what I like this photograph is of the Finnish Republican Club, which had 350 members. And they're here organized out in front of, I think it's either Nagani or Ishpeming. And you look at the signs, they read, "We want work, peace, plenty, not agitators. The agitators won't receive Finns again, or deceive Finns again. Agitators must go. 40,000 Finns demand somebody go. No red Finns around us." That's what their signs say. So I think that's a significant number of Finns who are members of the Republican Party. So again, this is evidence that suggests a very conservative political environment. But this is where God comes in. Yes?
What was that temple in the
That's a good question. I don't remember exactly. It was torn down in 1945. It was abandoned shortly after the Socialist Party was pretty much wiped out. And so, how many of you are familiar with the Finnish Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, also sometimes known as the Suomi Synod? Okay, some of you are. The Suomi Synod formed in 1899, and it had a membership here that was far greater than anywhere else among the Finnish population than in the Mosavi and elsewhere that I've been able to find. These are actual numbers for membership here in the Ishpeming and Nagani area. In 1910, there were roughly almost 2,200, over 2,200 members, or 45% of the Finnish population. And 10 years later, that number went up to 65% of the Finnish, almost 3,000 members. The church wanted to replicate the Church of Finland in the Lake Superior region. It was very traditionalist, very conservative, and it favored a paternalistic church and clergy. Many prominent Finnish businessmen actually participated in its formation in 1899. It had an actively adopted a strategy of accommodation with corporate capitalism. In fact, some of the churches here were on land that was given to them by CCI. Vehemently anti-socialist. There are some evidence in the oral histories references to Lutheran pastors haranguing the parishioners on Sunday services to avoid the socialists. In fact, in 1907, following the Great Mesabi strike, the first one that was very violent on the Marquette Iron Range, Finnish Lutheran pastors organized a resolution, anti-socialist resolution, that they had over 800 people sign, and it called for, quote, support of the American government and economic system, as well as to condemn the actions of Finnish socialists. They have blasphemed the entire Christian and cultural world and have tried to trample underfoot all moral purity in the home and society by their emphasis on atheism and anarchy. Martha Stott, who was a little girl at the time, remembers socialists being referred to in the churches as pinks, and she also remembers cousin Jack's, our Cornish friends, would kick the people who were socialists. She remembers synod ministers admonishing parishioners not to, quote, make waves and always be thankful for CCI. So, oh, I'm sorry, it was 240 people signed the anti-socialist resolution. My point being here is that unlike the Mesabi Range, and here's the difference in membership, the red bars indicate the Suomi Synod membership in the Mesabi Range, which had 2 violent large strikes. You can see that the membership here is, in most cases, more than double that on the Mesabi Range. So not only, which makes sense if we take the argument that this was a much more conservative, rural, agrarian-based Finnish population here. The role of the Suomi Synod Church in blunting or trying to get people to avoid socialist and socialist activities. And I'm talking too long. CCI, corporate paternalism. This is really important. After the strike of 1895, William Mather, everybody remembers William Mather, right? William Mather gives a speech to the Lake Superior Iron Mining Association, which was the industry group here, in 1898, in which he argues for doing things to try to reduce labor agitation, left-wing political activism, to blunt interest in forming our workers, and to create a more stable workforce. So he, as part of the progressive era, and this was happening in many other industries across the United States, companies began to do things like provide low-rent housing. I already mentioned the CCI owned 600 houses. They created community clubhouses and beautification awards. So not only did they had an award every year in the summertime, several dollars for the best looking gardens and yards and homes in each community guide. They had a pension plan, which was the first ever in the mining industry, which they implemented in 1909. And Gwynn, Company Town, was built in 1907, and this is the collection here. This, no, this one. Is it? No, sorry. This box and this box right here. Good story behind this. I came here 21 years ago, and almost 21 years ago to this date, it was in April 1997. I'm sitting in here, I come here, I take on this job, right? And part of my job is to collect this stuff. That's my job, is to find this stuff and collect it. When I get here, we don't have anything. I mean, I studied this region before I arrived. I realized, I knew that the iron mining industry was a major factor in the development of the white European settlement here in the history. Yet we had no records documenting that. And I thought, well, that's crazy. How is that possible? Michigan Tech Archives had the great Calumet Heckler, copper mining company records. So I said, well, Mining Journal does an article about me, new archivist in town, whatever. Came in, and one of the things I said in the article, which the reporter quoted me on, is first thing I'm going to do is look for iron mining company records, because we got to document that history, what happened. And somebody read the article, and I got a call from this guy. He said, hey, I saw this article about you, and you want iron mining company records. Well, I've got some. Would you be interested in them? And at this point, I was willing to take anything, and also to follow any leads that might take me somewhere else, because I hadn't made any contacts yet with CCI and so forth. And I said, sure. And he lived over here on Magnetic Street, and He said, you can come over and get them right now. I got to go to work, but my wife can give them to you. So I go and do that. And we get in the car. I run over to his house. His wife gives me this box and this group of material here. And I look at it, and I start to look at this stuff. And I see William Mather's name. I see Warren Manning, who was a nationally known urban architect. These are correspondence between him and Manning, between them and the county of Marquette, all having to do with the construction, the planning, the design, and construction of Gwynn. One of the, in here is the original map of what Gwynn was going to be laid out as. Gwynn was a model town. It was a company town. It was set up by William Mather to be a company town for employees of CCI. It was Gwynn. Gwynn was his daughter's name. And I looked at the woman and I said, oh my God, I realized what I had. What I had here. And I said, where did you get this? Because I thought maybe her husband could tell me, well, there's got to be more. And she looked at me and she said, oh, my husband works at the county landfill. This is not the first time this has happened to me. If I had time, I'd tell you other stories. Archivists happens to us all the time. He was just, that's where he went off to work, was the county landfill. One day CCI pulled up with a truck, throwing stuff out, and he just grabbed what he could, and now you're looking at it.
Wow.
And I've had 2 scholars write 2 professional peer-reviewed journal articles based in part on these records, because they were doing work on William Manning. And if I had time, I wanted to show you about, so there's the Gwynn records, the nursing reports, which I don't have time, I'm going way too long. The CCI had a doctors and nurses program, a company hospital. The Ishpeming Hospital was built in 1919. But I'd like to show you this, the potty letters, I call them. And I wish, I was going to have them distributed and have you all look at them, but let me read this to you. So now remember, we've already met M.M. Duncan, the superintendent of mines up here. And he writes to William Mather. Now remember, William Mather is the president of Cleveland Cliffs Iron Mine Company, a major corporation in the United States based in Cleveland. He's sitting in Cleveland right now. This is 1908. And Duncan is writing to Mather. At the last meeting of the superintendents and mining captains, the question of water closets for the different dries was recommended, and Mr. Meany, or Many, directed to prepare plans and estimates. What's a water closet? Bathroom, right? I enclose herewith this estimate, his estimate for the mass dry, together with blueprint therein there referred to. Now he's talking about a bathroom. Okay? We're thinking about this for a moment. This has been gone over by Mr. Moulton and Mr. Elliott, and as far as they think desirable. We blame the men for committing nuisances underground, and at the same time do not supply them with proper facilities on the surface. I think the building of these water closets is a move in the right direction, and in spite of the expense, I recommend that we at least build one for a trial. It might be after using one that changes would be advisable. Now, think about this for a moment. CCI, in various permutations, has been operating on the iron mine for over 50 years, and they're just now getting around to buy a bathroom for the workers. Here's Mr. Mather's reply. Dear sir, referring to this matter, the Cleveland Hardware Company here have something of this kind. I think, however, that their arrangement would cover the 6 closet seats on each side of the toilet room to be cast out of one piece of earthenware with a trap at one end, flushing all 6 closets at one time. This is supposed to save plumbing and traps, provided that water is cheap. Perhaps you could use wastewater from the mines. The casting the whole seat of one piece would also save the wooden covers, and if the closet seats in your plan were placed back to back, perhaps some plumbing might be saved. The urinal, I presume, might be very simple. Something doubtless like a slab at the back and a trough at the bottom with a trap at one end of the trough, and a pipe above the trough with small holes to serve as a flusher. These are merely suggestions.
Having been in a mine in Minnesota here last year, they talked about the older days of mining, that a dynamite box was a hot commodity to the miners because they could carry it with them and sit on it to go to the bathroom up in the drifts.
But what strikes you as really remarkable about this exchange? This is a president of a major corporation who is writing from Cleveland in remarkable detail about a toilet, one toilet, and his concern, overarching concern, is saving money. I love this, you know, the back-to-back would save some of the plumbing. And the urinal, he's really obsessed about the urinal, you know. Doesn't want the, why don't we just put a hole in the ground, right? So my point in showing you, and I call these the potty letters with the students, is I try to, you know, suggest to them, to, again, to reinforce this notion, you know, this idea that work was awful in the mines. Okay, it was really, really hard. It was brutal. It was dangerous. Between 1898 and 1940, 675 men died on the Marquette Iron Range. In the 1880s, there was a story that if a man died in the morning on the range, the undertaker would come up from Ishmael and Nagani to the mine on his horse, you know, with the hearse, gather up the body in the morning, but then sit around and wait a few hours before heading back, just in case another one came. It was a joke, but it was not far from real. So you can see that work was brutal. The fatality rates were high. CCIs was a little lower. They had 321 total. That doesn't include the Barton Hecker disaster, by the way. Their death rate, the death rate on the mine Minnesota range was 7.5 per thousand per year. Here it was a little under 5. So it was a little safer, but still very brutal. And if you look at the deaths by ethnicity, in 1900 to 1909, 78 Finns died in mines. Same 78 another, so 78 the next 10 years. It starts to drop in 1920, 29 to 13 and 8. The Finns were getting wiped out. Pretty bad. Swedes were next, well, English Swedes, and it gets down low. But there were a lot, this is by ethnic group. Why was this happening? Well, because there was poor discipline on the mines. There was also a contract system, which was brought to us by the Cornish, because the Cornish miners they liked their independence. And so they favored a system which they called the contract system, in which basically the company, rather than paying each man a wage for the day or something, would pay a team according to their output. So if the faster they worked, the more they mined, the more they got paid. There was also demand for labor was greater than the supply for much of the years shown here. There was a lack of laws forcing compensation for fatalities and employee carelessness. I have this is an actual report of a mine death. A man, and ironically, his name is Mountjoy, which I believe is a Finnish name. This is his death in 1925. This is the official report from the CCI annual reports, which are in our collections. For some reason, they're not readily available. A chunk of ore had lodged in the measuring pocket. Mountjoy took a short ladder and suspended it from the skip tender's platform and went in the measuring pocket to release the chunk. The skip tender and a motorman stood on the platform watching Mountjoy while he was working in the pocket. A few minutes later, William Nault, the underground foreman, came to the situation and went down to the platform. While climbing the ladder, he saw that Mountjoy was in a dangerous place and ordered him to get out of the pocket. As Nault walked along the platform, he reached the motorman, who was in a stooping position. The latter, the motorman, moved to get out of his way, and in so doing, his clothes caught the handle of the air lever, which operates the fingers of the storage pocket. This opened the door, and ore rushed into the measuring pocket, completely covering Mountjoy. Nault immediately reached for the lever and shut off the air, but he was not quick enough to prevent the measuring pot from completely covering Mountjoy. Can you imagine? I mean, this is the kind of deaths that would occur and were reported. So, very, very difficult situation. I already talked about the increasement, and then I'm going to finish up with this. How many have seen this photograph? You guys are. Familiar with this photograph? Not many of you. What are we looking at? That's right. And where is this? Downtown Nagani? Huh? It is Marquette, and for the sake of time, I'm going to go quick through. This is 1926. It is a Ku Klux Klan rally march. You can see that's Washington Street up there, and it's going down Front Street. There's the Veerling today. Look at the trolley track. Oh, isn't it sad that it's not there anymore? 1926. The Klansmen, by the way, are not masked because the Michigan State Legislature the year before passed a law prohibiting wearing masks in public. It was a directed, anti-Klan measure. So that's why they're not masked. I can tell you there are no African Americans living here in Marquette County at this time. Why are they here? When you think about the Klan, what are the two periods in U.S. history that most come to mind when you think of the Klan? Civil War, Reconstruction. What's the other kind? Other than today, the 1960s, right? Do you think of the 1920s? Actually, the Klan, this was their heyday. The Klan was like a third party in the United States by 1926. It had dominated state legislatures around the country. My home state of Oregon was completely controlled by the Klan in the state legislature. The governor was reputedly a Klansman. My hometown of Eugene, Oregon, which today is radical lefty rural hotbed, was actually controlled. The entire city council was controlled by the Klan. The only black people in Oregon that lived there were in the Portland area. So they're marching. There aren't any black people here. Who are they marching against? Socialists.
Anybody who's not white.
Anybody who's not Protestant. And remember, who is the group of people that I showed you are also coming here? Italians, Slovenians, Croatians, Poles, and they tended to be what? And they tended to look like this guy. But who does he look like? He doesn't look like Osama bin Laden to you? And look what he's standing at, Uncle Sam, a Great Wall. And this guy is bringing disease, poverty, and he's got a bomb right here. It's about to go off. So remember I told you it's a great period of upheaval, social dysfunction, economic dysfunction, lots of fear-based warmongering. The Klan in this period was actually very xenophobic, nationalist, anti-immigrant organization. It was also puritanical, very much against alcohol use and other behaviors that were associated with Catholics again and other foreign immigrants. So much so, there was so much the Congress passes a quota law in 1921 which severely restricts immigration to the country. In 1924, 2 years before that rally you saw, another immigration law is passed called the Immigration Act, which severely restricts, places quotas on people from Southern and Central Europe who look like this guy, and increases the quota 86 to 86.5% for Northern Europeans, the ones in the arrest records. Right? In fact, the ones that were in the arrest records could have been the same ones marching down the street, reacting to. And Northern Europeans are Norwegians, right? Finns, English. You see the connection, commonality between. I think it's so amazing to me that, and the wall here is what's really, and he kind of does look like Trump, doesn't he? Is really what's dramatic to me as well. But it's a reminder that xenophobia, petty nationalism, racism is a time-honored political tradition in the United States. And it should come as no surprise that the Klan is resurgent now when they were having a great time in the 1920s. So that, I'm wrapping it up. I went through that really fast. I'm sorry I talked a lot longer than I expected. Does anybody have any other questions for me about anything in the collections?
Oh, can you email this
Sure.
presentation?
Yeah, you just send me.
Well,
We're actually gonna. Yeah, we have a place on our website. We'll put this online. This was also recorded on Facebook if you want to have access to it. But on our website here, you can access that through our exhibits tab. Go to public presentations, and we have already have something up here about tonight's talk. And we'll put this in here and a link to the Facebook thing. And also, if you're interested in our collections, you can click our collections tab, get a link to our collection guide, where you can do keyword searches across our finding aids, look at our collection highlights, our local government and records. You might have wondered why we have the court records here. We're also a local government repository for Marquette, for the Central UP.
I have a question about
Yeah.
that. At what point does Marquette County get rid of their documents and send them over here?
It varies. It depends on a complicated retention schedule, and it's with the state. We basically by default have become the state archives of the UP
Okay, so
in many ways.
like marriage licenses.
We have affidavits and also birth records. Some delivered. We have coroner's reports. We have what do we have?
Is this
Number
from
one?
Marquette County or the?
It's around the Central UP,
Oh.
so it could be in various different counties. You just need to take a look at our website, what we have, do
We do have some
searches.
marriage licenses.
Yes, we do have marriages. Call us up. Email us at archives.nmu.edu, archives@nmu.edu, which will take it to this site where it gets processed through, and you can find that stuff.
You do list your holdings on your website, right?
Huh?
The holdings are listed on your website?
Yeah, so if you click on this link right here, guide, this will take you to our collection content management server, which has our findings aids to all this material on there. You can do keyword searches and subject searches. Also, if you're interested, I should have showed you this, the Cleveland Cliffs Iron Mining Company records that I've been showing you, we actually have a number of that, quite an extensive digitization project that we did a few years ago with a grant. We digitized between almost 60,000 documents in the Cleveland Cliffs Iron Mining Company records. If you go to the finding aid, so the stuff I showed you, the reports of the superintendent of mining and so forth, you can actually look at these online.
And you would have lists of like salaries and things like that?
Summaries of salaries,
Uh-huh.
wages, and so you'd actually see the original record.
Yeah.
And if you have any questions on how to use that or access it, don't hesitate to call us. So I hope that you've learned something today, and also the connection between archives and how we can understand or add to our understanding of our local community here through the archives. Write to the president of the university, tell them how wonderful this place is, even though he doesn't like me and doesn't talk to me. That's okay.
That's probably to your benefit.
Probably, but I do have a good relationship with the provost. She does. Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you all very much for coming. Oh, we did have one left.
Well, where would the applications for citizenship be?
Here.
They would be.
Yeah, we actually have them. What you saw